Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Machan Leira Online Smicha. Based on the Haira from the Rebbe that during the 3 weeks and the 9 days you should learn in Yonim that are connected to the Beis Hamikdash. So I'd like to share a couple of minutes about a halacha in the Hilchos Beis Hamikdash, halacha in the Beis Hamikdash that's not so much discussed. And it could be a shaila that's connected to Hilchos Mashiach. The Rambam brings, and that's a pasuk in the end of Parshas Yisroi, that leisala b'maylas al mizbechi, that when you're making the big mizbeach, the mizbeach of the karbanis, you're not allowed to walk up to the mizbeach, to the top part of the mizbeach, with steps. There has to be a ramp. There has to be a different way how to go up. And many beautiful lessons we learn for this, because the Torah says a very interesting reason. Because a person, when he walks up steps, he has to separate his legs, and it's a little disrespectful for the stones that he's stepping on. And therefore, if we all know what the Sfarim say, that if the Torah is so makbid not to do something disrespectful, there's a beautiful sikh from the Rebbe where the Rebbe says, even a minig bizayin, nobody intended to do anything disrespectful. It's not really that disrespectful because the Kohanim wore michnas vad, certain type of pants. But yet, because it's a minig b'zoyin, the Torah was makbid that we can't have steps there. So of course we have to be careful how to not to embarrass another human. But the fact is, the halacha says you're not allowed to have steps walking up to the mizbeach, because by doing that you'll be megala ereva, and it seems to be something disrespectful. So there is an obvious klutz kasha. The obvious klutz kasha is, if it's such a disrespectful thing, this is not the only place in the Beis Hamikdash that we needed to get from point A to a higher point. There were Shir Hamalis, the Song of Ascents, where it was 15 steps, and there were different parts in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Azara, where there were steps. And if some come along and say, those were only not in the Kodesh, guess what? We find that how did the Kohen do the avodah of the menorah, clean the menorah, light the menorah? The Chazal tell us there was a stool in front of the menorah having 3 steps. And that stool, whoever did the avodah of cleaning the menorah, lighting the menorah, would go up those steps. So there's an obvious klutz kasha. Why by the mizbeach there is such an issue of not having steps, and there's a milsa b'taima, there's a reason to it. Yet we find so many other places in the Mishkan, in the Mikdash, where there were steps. So there, again, what I'm going to say now is what I read in Svarim. Some are nobody has a clear reason, a raya from a Rishon to prove what he's saying. But some is milsa b'taima, some is a logical svara, and some is a halachic svara. The milsa b'taima is that in the menorah, by the menorah, it was slightly different than the mizbeach, because the mizbeach you had to walk up the ramp. But when you get on the top, there was a flat ground, flat space where you were able to, whoever was doing the avodah was able to stand. Even though halachically they had to throw some things from the top of the kevesh. But the fact is, you came to a flat land, and therefore you were able to do the avodah. Imagine the kohen, whoever does the avodah of the menorah, is, first of all, he's carrying stuff, oils and utensils to clean the menorah. If you make it at a ramp, there is no landing space on top. So where is the kohen going to put all his stuff? How is he going to hold the oil? It's technically an issue. Now, okay, it's a svara. This is a svara I read. I have as I mentioned before, I have a shaila on the flip side. It clearly brought in Gemara that the Kohen had to do some sort of avodah standing on the top of the kevesh and throwing some stuff on the mizbeach. So even he needed a certain part of avodah when he was still on a ramp. But then there is a halachic answer. The halachic answer is there's a unique difference between the kevesh of the mizbeach and the steps everywhere else in the Mikdash. Everywhere else in the Mikdash, whatever there were steps, those steps were not considered a holy vessel. They were either non-Kodesh, they weren't yet in the Kodesh, or even if they were in the Kodesh, you can have a menorah without the step. The step was just to make it easier for the person to do the avodah. The step itself wasn't considered a Kli Kodesh. The Gemara says clearly, Gemara in Chulin, I think it is, the Gemara says that the Mizbeach, however, is completely different. The Mizbeach is only considered a full-fledged Mizbeach if it has a certain checklist, if it has a keren, the 4 kronos, if it's ribua, and if the Mizbeach has a kevesh. If the Mizbeach doesn't have a kevesh, it's not a valid Mizbeach. So in other words, the kevesh is part of the kedushas of the kli, the keli of the Mizbeach. It is part of what makes a Mizbeach. So this is different, because this kevesh is a Kli Kodesh. The ramp is a Kli Kodesh. So even though logically there is actually no difference why you could be more disrespectful here than there, but the fact is, this, to show a little disrespect on a Kli Kodesh, would be worse than showing disrespect, even in a minor way, for a non-Kli Kodesh, because the kevesh is already, once you step on the kevesh, is part of the Mizbeach. What other halacha could make a big difference based on this outcome? I saw a shir that my Rosh Yeshiva Rabbi Garlitsky wrote. What would in Mir Hashem, Mashiach is coming very, very soon, and we're going to build the Beis Hamikdash. Today's days, there are so many, due to technology, there's so many easier ways to get from a lower level to a higher level. You don't even have to walk. You could stand in one place and the elevator will bring you up, or an escalator will bring you up. If the whole shot of why you're not allowed to walk on steps is you shouldn't separate your legs and it will be disrespectful, all right? So I don't necessarily need a kevesh. Let's make a escalator, even though there are steps there, but nobody's moving. Or maybe an elevator. So based on what we said before, it comes out, no, a kevesh you need. The reason why you need a kevesh, because the kevesh is part of the structure of the Mizbeach. The only difference is, would you be allowed to put on top of the kevesh, or near the kevesh, a ladder, or even steps, or an elevator, anything, as long as you're not walking in a disrespectful manner on the kevesh, because that's a Kli Kodesh. We said everywhere else is no problem. So would you be able to have all these mechanisms, whatever other way of lifting, in the side of on the side of the kevesh, or possibly even on top of the kevesh? That's Hilchos Mashiach. That's something we're waiting to hear from Mashiach.